Alright, if you're watching this video, it might be that you sat your UCAT already, and you're waiting on the averages and a little bit worried about what you got, and whether it's a good score or not. Now that's a complex question, and in today's video I'm going to try and answer that using some data, some reliable sources, and sort of what's been happening over the last few years, and give you a detailed breakdown into what a good UCAT score actually is. If that sounds like a good idea to you, let's get straight into the video. So if you don't know who I am, I'm a fourth year medical student, and I've been researching UCAT scores for the last week or so, trying to understand what goes into making a good UCAT score, because it's a complex topic. Now let's start off with some understanding basically about what the score is. So it's scored normally from 1,200 to 3,600. It's scored on 4 numerical scores and 1 banded score. So verbal reasoning, decision making, abstract reasoning, quantitative reasoning are scored from 300 to 900, and situational judgment is scored from bands 1 to band 4. Band 1 being the best, band 4 being the least best. Now, the scores of each section are obviously 300 to 900, and normally they range from around 500 to 700. Those are sort of where most people end up. What that tells us is that it changes year on year quite a fair amount based on the difficulty of the UCAT. Now, obviously each person gets an individual test, and so it's different for everyone, but the general difficulty of the tests vary year to year, so that's normal and that'll reflect in the average. Typically, for most year groups, an average for each individual section is going to be around the 650 range. That's the average for each section. It obviously varies again. Abstract reasoning probably has a slightly lower average compared to the other sections. Now for situational judgment, most people will end up in band 2. Now band 1 is also quite common. A lot of people end up in band 1 because those are the bands which most universities will take you happily. Now, looking at how universities use the UCAT, it's slightly more difficult. Every university uses it differently. For example, let's talk about the University of Bristol. They use a basic cutoff at around 2,870. Now, this may change year on year, so if you are applying to Bristol and are worried by this, go and check their website. It may well have changed. But from my research, they use a cutoff around 2,870, and what they do is they will basically look at your UCAT and say, okay, people who've got above 2,870 will take you for interview, people who haven't, we're not going to proceed to interview. So that is a little bit cruel, I guess, but that's just how they use the UCAT and how they value it. But it's important that you look at those things, because the UCAT, the great thing about the UCAT is you can get your result before you apply to university. So if you get below 2,870, probably don't apply to Bristol. They're probably not going to take you on to interview, or any other university that may have a cutoff higher than your own score. So the University of Birmingham uses it slightly differently. They use 60% of your overall score is allocated to your interview, your application assessments, things like your A-levels, personal statement, it's everything else that your school tells them about you. And then 40% is allocated to your UCAT. So you don't have a cutoff per se, but it's not sort of so black and white as Bristol is. On the other hand, Edinburgh use it virtually as a completely random criterion that they use for interview. It's used more to boost your application if you have a good score, and if you have a poor score, it's not really used. So they use it quite nicely, so that if you've got a great score, it's used quite a lot. So if you want to go to Edinburgh, that might be a great place to apply to, seeing as they don't really take the UCAT that importantly, but it is forming a part of your application. They do, by my research, have some sort of a cutoff at around 2,400. So that is sort of a cutoff where they say anyone who's got below 2,400, we just won't take you. But if you get above 2,400, your UCAT will form part of your application. There's no other cutoff. And they also do the same thing for your situational judgment. So if you get a band 4 in SJT, they normally don't take you. That just gives you a variety of how different universities use the UCAT to their strengths and weaknesses. And it's just important to look at how the universities you're applying to are using it. And there's something that people talk about called tactical applying. The UCAT is really easy to do this because you get your result way ahead of the university application deadline. Tactically apply to the universities based on your score. If you get a weaker score, maybe apply to the unis who don't value the UCAT as much, or just have a really low cutoff. If you get a really good UCAT, use it to your advantage and apply to universities who only look at high UCAT scorers and maybe are only interested in those people who get above maybe 2,700, for example. That's just something that you might want to take into consideration. At the end of the day, the UCAT, remember, is only one part of your application. There are so many other things that you can do, your BMAT, your A-levels, your interviews, so don't get hung up over the UCAT. It's just one thing that forms a massive application that you'll send up to the universities. But that gives you a little bit more of a breakdown into how the UCAT scored and how it's measured. As a summary, the UCAT scored from 1,200 to 3,600, band 1 to band 4 SJT. Each university uses the UCAT very differently, so don't look at averages, look at how your university is using it and tactically apply to each university based on your UCAT score. Hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully that gives you everything you need to know about the UCAT. Aside from that, thank you for listening to the video. I will see you all in the next one.